So I'm head of process improvement within the transformation team. I've been working on timetabling about May, June last year, and I've been working with the wider project team that are on here and estates to shape the 24-25 process. If I could ask everyone puts themselves on mute, that would be great, just because we do have 260 participants now in the meeting, so if I'm not on mute, it will get quite difficult. So thank you for that. So the plan for today is, I know many of you will have been at our roadshows that took place over the course of January, so we'll not repeat that content, you'll be happy to know, but we will touch on the plan for 24-25 and also answer some questions that came out the back of the roadshows, just to make sure that everyone has the same information regardless of which college or area you represent. So just a couple of things before we really get started. We were wanting to record the session just so that we can make the content available to people that weren't able to make the session this afternoon. By all means, if you want to take your camera off, you can do. But I hope that is okay for everyone that we record the session. If that is the case, we have started recording actually. So thanks for Meg for recording. Also, just a little bit more, just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. There will be the opportunity to ask a question at the end. Now, clearly with 280 now attendees on the call, raising hands wasn't going to work particularly well. So you can see at the top of every slide, there is a link here to menti.com and a code. If you're on your desktop and you go onto your web browser, go into menti.com, put that code of 2694522 into the screen that you're presented with, then it will allow you to ask a question, and we'll cover off as many as we can at the end. There's some questions, you might want to wait until the end because there's some questions that have come out quite frequently in the roadshows, and it might well be one of those questions that you have. So we'll cover them and then we'll offer the opportunity to ask a question. One thing I will say is that we will answer questions specifically about the timetabling process for next year. I know it's sometimes quite hard to make the division, but any questions round about more estate type questions, so what's happening with a particular building, kit within a room, all those sorts of questions will not be able to answer today. There is a link at the end, or an email address at the end for the project. We also have colleagues in the team that are from estates, so if you want to email that question in, we'll get back to you when we can. But I hope you appreciate it, just for the topic that we're trying to cover today, which is the timetabling process for next year. We'll not cover off questions on certain AV equipment and certain rooms or certain buildings. And I think that's all the housekeeping stuff that I had to say before I started. So we are recording. Menti's available for asking questions. We'll unfortunately not take questions by raising hands, just because there's nearly 300 people on the call. So if we start doing that, it'll get very difficult. But hopefully you get some information on this in terms of the process that we're looking to follow for timetabling. In particular, we'll go over what the immediate process is that we're going to actually start in the 19th of February. Just a quick reminder, if you can go on mute, that would be fantastic. Okay, so let me start. Meg, could you flip the slide on for me? Okay, so yes, we're here to talk about academic year 24-25. Now, we have a goal within the timetabling project. We will not achieve this goal in 1 year. So for those of you that were at the road shows, you'll have had a little bit more context around about this. And that is that although the timetabling project was stood up last year, and many of you will be familiar with the approach that was taken last year, that timetable of 23, 24, and the process that we followed really was designed to get a level of stability in our process. The year before, we were highly unroomed before we started teaching. We were in external venues, and we needed to take that last year to get back on campus and get our rooming percentage really high before we started teaching. This year is really the first year of a multi-year project to look at trying to improve the end-to-end process. So not just stabilise it, actually look to improve it. And this statement here is from our sponsors, Frank Cotton and Moira Fishbacker Smith, which is, why is the project stood up? And it is here to try and deliver a process which delivers more efficient and flexible utilisation of the teaching estate, with two words highlighted and being efficient and flexible. So we want to be efficient in terms of utilising the space that we have to its maximum effect. Efficient also in terms of just the number of people required to get involved in timetabling and the effort, the sheer effort and engagement that is required to get a successful timetable. Delivered no so evidence the fact that we've got over 300 people on a call to review this part of the process. But also, you've got to balance the efficiency up against being flexible. So we clearly last year, for those of you that were involved in the process last year, in order to create some stability, we deployed a minimal change approach, not the most flexible approach. So one that we will look to change this year. We need the timetable to serve learning and teaching, and not the other way about in terms of the timetable dictating how learning and teaching takes place at the university. So we need to deliver something that's as flexible as it possibly can be, while still being efficient, and clearly you can see there's a balancing act there. So just on the fact that last year, or academic year 23-24, we had a minimal change approach. Next year, we will move away from minimal change because we want to try and introduce more flexibility into our process, but we need to do that with some caution, because going from one extreme of minimal change to the other end of the spectrum in terms of unlimited, uncontrolled change clearly gives you massive risk at just returning back to your outcomes that you had right at the beginning. So, Meg, could you flip the slide on for me? The theme for this year is we will look to accommodate as much change as we can that supports the learning and teaching strategy, but really with a focus on achieving a right first time approach to timetabling. And this particularly means that our edit and prep period, which is effectively from the 19th of February, so Monday, to the end of April, is the real key time when we've got the opportunity to do this. So during that period, we roll over the timetable from the previous year and we open up for changes to that timetable. So really what we are asking for is that if we're going to make change to the timetable, then where possible, get that change in during that period of middle of February to the end of April, because doing that means that we have got much more time to try and react to that change than if we are notified of that change literally just before teaching starts. Now, we're all aware, because we've worked with timetables and some of the academic colleagues for long enough now to know that stuff just sometimes happens that means that things aren't known by the end of April, and that's okay. We do appreciate that there will be an element of change requests always needed once we've done the rooming and once we've published the timetable. That's okay. But there'll be some examples we'll talk about later that hopefully just paints the picture around about why getting as much of the data and as much of the requirements for 24-25 in the timetabling system during the middle of February to the end of April gives us a fighting chance of producing a timetable that works for everyone. So what we're looking to do is work a little bit different during this period in comparison to what we did last year. We're going to work together with representatives from each of the programs and schools to just get visibility as to what changes you would like to put through in the timetable. And that's so that we can see the level of change across the university, because timetabling is a huge big jigsaw across all of the programs and all of the schools and all the subjects who are all looking for their own requirements to be met. And we need to try and fit that jigsaw together. So in order to get visibility, not just within one area, but across the full university. We'll look to identify what changes that are really low impact. So it might be a course that's no longer running. That's okay. We can just get those changes made on the timetable. But where we have got amendments to the timetable that have a wider impact. So things like when you're moving a time and date to make sure that you don't clash with something else that's in a completely separate program. We want to try and work together as much as we can on that to try and get that information right first time. Where we don't have information on certain events, work together to try and get that data quality improved. So that might be things like, is the lecturer attached to the event so that we can make sure they're not running from one end of the campus to the next. And just try and work together to make as much of the changes that do have a larger impact, work together to try and give them a fighting chance of actually being accommodated on the timetable. And we'll also look to identify some of the historic clashes that we know that we've got in the timetable today, so that we can try and work together to remove them for students prior to enrolment. So that's another goal that we've got, and we're working with some of the My Campus team to identify some of those clashes and resolve some of them. So it's a really key period. How successful this year, the 24-25's timetable will be determined about how good an edit and prep period we have. Once we do edit and prep and we get into May, Andrina and her team will work their magic and room as much of those requests as possible. And hopefully we deliver a high rooming percentage before teaching starts, like we did last year, where 96% of the timetable was roomed prior to starting. Okay, so if you just flick on to the next slide for me, Meg, each programme and school has got a nominated contact that will work with the central timetabling team and the project every week to try and review the level of change that's happening on the timetable. So familiarise yourself with the contact, you probably know them very well for your area. We'll cover a little bit of the process that we're looking to follow for edit and prep in a second, but really just if you can familiarise yourself with the name, because they may well be in contact if they haven't already been. Either them or their team will be in contact with you if you're sitting here as an academic colleague to establish what the teaching requirements are for next year. If you flick onto the next slide, Meg, we'll just cover at a high level what we're looking to do during the period. So as I said, the contacts that were on the previous slide will look to, along with their teams, gather up a list effectively of changes that we're looking to make in the timetable. Where we've got low impact changes, that's fine. Them and their teams, they can get them updated on CMIS and make sure that they're done to the highest possible quality. Where we've got high impact changes, they'll look to consult with us just so that we can try and have a conversation before they go to the effort of updating CMIS with all those requirements. Now you can see on the left-hand side there, from the point of those requirements being gathered from academic colleagues to them actually fulfilling all of those requirements on CMIS in terms of getting the timetabling system updated. There's quite a lot of things that are happening. They might need to consult and consult with us as a project and with the central timetabling team to make sure that they can accommodate those changes or have a fighting chance of accommodating the changes. And obviously there's just a lot of admin required to actually update the events themselves in terms of making sure accessibility flags are put on there, all the time and dates are sitting correctly and there's no changes to that. So I guess just a word of note in terms of within each area, if we can sort of work together during this time to make sure that your professional service colleagues have enough time within this window to actually get that job done, i.e. if we wait until the middle to end of April, these holidays, etc., during that period as well, giving ourselves very little time to get the data in good shape prior to rooming. So really try and engage with this process as early as you can, albeit I know that there's maybe some unknowns that you've got, but the sooner that you engage with it, the more chance we've got of, as I say, getting it right. So all this diagram's really illustrating is that there are some changes that you will put forward that those professional service staff, under the guidance of the names that were in the previous slide, will be able to just let us know as a project team that is are happening, and they will update CMIS as normal. But there will be some, so if you're looking to change the mode of delivery, significant change in size, looking to introduce a new course or changing time and dates, that they'll just need to consult with us. And the reason why we're looking to consult is we'll only take a look at the heat map of the estate in terms of when the estate is busy and when it's not across all our room categories, to work out if you're asking for a room of a certain size at 11 o'clock on a Thursday, you're probably giving yourself quite a high chance of having an unroomed event at the end of rooming because the campus is so busy at that time. So where can we find a slot that means that you get the room that you need with the equipment and features that you need? Where are you more likely to get a room of that specification, so that we can try and fit it in. We're also going to use a tool that's been developed by our PIA team that is based on ClipView, that will allow us and the contacts in the previous slide to just take a quick look at making sure that when we're moving a time, for example, that we're not creating a clash within the timetable. So that tool is just there to sort of give a bit of guidance. It looks at the 23-24 timetable, and effectively will tell you what course codes you will clash with if you move to certain times and dates. It will not replace any requirement that is currently there for people to engage with advisors on such a topic. It is there as a tool to help guide and give some information. But if you have an internal process, which is, certain people need to be notified of changes and consulted with, that will continue. We're not looking to touch any of that. It's just simply a bit of a tool that we've put in place because we got feedback that particularly when it comes to cross-program clashes, there's not a huge amount of information out there. So hopefully that helps everyone try and navigate that. So that's really the process that we want to follow. We will meet with those contacts that were on the previous slide every week to see what changes are coming through from our academic colleagues, that are those required changes that are needed. We'll discuss the ones that need to be discussed. Then hopefully they can just be updated in CMIS. And for ones that we're not as concerned with, then they'll just be updated on CMIS directly. Okay, if we can flick onto the next slide. So I hope that makes sense. In terms of the timelines, so at the minute, we're just making sure that both the nominated contacts that were on the slide a couple of slides ago now, and their teams are really familiar with what we're trying to do this year. Clearly, it's a bit of change to what we've done in previous years, so we will take a couple of weeks to find our feet. Be patient with us on that. I'm sure working together we'll come up with a successful way of doing it. If they've not already been in contact, I know some areas we've been having discussions on this since as early as November, so I know some schools out there are well ahead of this. But if you've not had a conversation round about your teaching requirements for 24-25, we really encourage you to start having those conversations, because again, we're entering a period where CMIS is open for the changes to be made. So if we leave it too late, it's very difficult to update all the events to the standard that's needed to really get a timetable that works for people. Once those conversations I've had and those lists start coming into the project for us to review, then we'll just meet weekly with those contacts and work directly with the professional service colleagues to get as many of those changes made onto CMIS, have as many of those consultations as possible, and try and make sure that our events are, as I say, updated to the highest possible standard, because as I say, there's accessibility flags, lecturer names. There's a lot. There's a lot needs to go into actually updating the CMIS individual events in order for us to be able to room effectively for you in May. And we've also got holiday period right at the end of it, so clearly impacts people's availability. If you just flick to the next slide, this is just a little bit of an example of the sort of level of change that we want to discuss every week in these forums with the nominated contacts. So what is the course? And this is a mock-up, by the way, so if one of these course codes are yours, do not worry. This is just literally a mock-up slide. So what the course code is, who the convener is that you're engaging with on that one. Is it encountering some sort of change, and what are those change details? And then some of those ones we'll need to consult on, some of them will not. So hopefully that just gives a little bit of picture of the level that we want to be trying to engage in with this year. Flicking on to the next slide, don't worry, I've not got too many to go, and then we'll go on to the questions. So they ask, so if you're sitting here and you're an academic colleague, it is just, can we start to, if you've not already done so, start to have some conversations around about what 24-25 looks like for your courses, and just allow your professional service staff enough time to get everything on CMIS updated for you. When it comes to professional service side, if you can familiarise yourself again with the names, because they will be, I guess, leading locally within your area this activity. So you can first port a call on any questions, go through them, because they will need information from you as we go through this. And just also be prepared to engage in that process of, if it's something that can just be updated in CMIS, go ahead and do it. And if it's something that you need to just hold off on at the minute, invest in that effort to update CMIS before we've had a consultation. Just as I say, engage in that process. There'll also be training, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in a bit. There will be CMIS training in place over the course of this period, so that people sort of understand best practice for updating CMIS events, because we do appreciate we've got a number of new colleagues and colleagues that have been here for a number of years that are maybe more familiar with CMIS and what needs done. So we'll be running some best practice sessions just so that everyone has the same level of awareness as to the effort that's required to get CMIS in good shape. Okay, just moving on, and then we get on to questions. This is the last slide. Just a question that's came up before. So we will be having weekly sessions with the nominated contacts through this period. Some of you will also be involved in college sessions that were running throughout the course of last year. If you weren't involved in those sessions, forget this slide ever happened. Effectively, what will happen is that if you are involved in those college sessions that normally happen every 2 weeks, they will continue, and we'll look to give it as a bit of an opportunity to report back to the college on how things are going, and we'll have the weekly sessions to go through the finer detail of the changes that are happening at a course level. Again, if you've not been involved in these bi-weekly college sessions last year, you don't need to worry. There's no need for you to join them. It's more of just a general update. Okay, so next we will move on to some of the common questions that we got. So between myself and Andrina, we will we'll tackle these off. So the easy ones I'll pick, and Andrina, you can have some of the more difficult ones. Okay, so I'll run through them. So a common one that we got, if I actually take the one at the top, the two at the far left hand side. So how can we ensure travel time and lectures how do we ensure that travel time between lectures are considered for students and staff, and how do we ensure that accessibility needs are met? So on the first one, when it comes to travel times, Andrina and team do have a mechanism for staff, for example, for being able to make sure that you're not sprinting across campus. However, I think the last number, if John's in the college, probably they would tell me the exact percentage, but I think last year we had something like 53% of events in CMIS had the lecturer attached, which means the other 47 didn't have any lecturer details on there. And that makes it really difficult. If the lecturer details aren't on the events, the process that they to move significant distances across campus becomes really difficult. So it's something that, again, we asked during edit prep. The more events we can get with the lecturer details on the event means that we can consider where people are having to move to and from. So an answer to the question of how do we ensure, it goes back to getting the events and CMIS updated to the highest possible quality. We do appreciate that in some cases you maybe don't know the lecturer until later on in the year. That's okay, but what we ask for at the minute is where you do know who's going to be teaching events, that we make sure that those lecturer details are on there, so that we can then utilise the work the guys can do to mitigate against lecturers having to move between buildings that are a significant distance away. Accessibility needs is for both staff and students are similar. So for staff, again, if the name's on the event is the first step, but also the accessibility flag on the event as well, because if it's not there, then when the guys come to rooming, they'll not give you a room that's flagged as being accessible. So again, really important from a data quality perspective that during edit prep we get it right, and we get it right first time. And accessibility for students. So for continuing students, we have literally just got the list through that will go out to the appropriate reps for continuing students that have got that have flagged accessibility needs. So contacts within each of the colleges will be engaged to really work with those lists in terms of having conversations around about pre-indication of choice in terms of what these students are looking to do for 24-25. And then again, we can build, if we know what lecture and seminar that they plan to be on, we can again make sure that those events have got accessible rooms. For new students, we've not been able to do that at the minute, and that is effectively just because we don't get notified of those accessibility needs until a lot of times after the period that we're rooming. But again, that's one of the reasons the change request process is there, so that we can try and accommodate them closer to teaching starting. Right, I will take one that Andrina can maybe answer, so I can have a drink of water. 80% utilisation. Will 80% utilisation be reviewed in session 24-25? So we will look to maintain that rule. Andrina, would you Bertha speaking just about why that rule's there and what it helps us with when it comes to matching rooms for classes.
Yep. Well, I'm a junior for timetabling. For those who don't know me, most probably will. I've been leading the team for the last few years and we've been quite involved in this process. So the 80% utilisation kind of came into play probably when we started to return to campus to help us with that sort of sense of supporting the campus on unknown change. So as a lot of people on the call have probably been aware, there's been a lot of damage done since we returned to the campus at the start of second semester. And if we were not holding that 80% utilisation, it would have been almost impossible for us to have a bit of swing space on the campus in order to re-room that teaching. Another question that kind of fits with that one on this screen is the one about why can I not have a bigger room if it is available? And that's the exact same reason. We're always holding a bit of swing space across the timetable for the unknowns. As Gary has spoke to, we don't always know what the final size of a class is going to be when we room it early on in the period. And by keeping that 80% utilisation, it helps us support the unknown growth that comes across the timetable, the unknown changes, because they do continue to happen, and it helps us where we have an emergency and we need to move teaching across the campus. The one below it that talks about, is it possible to have the same room for the whole semester? My kind of straight answer is yes. If your data is all put into the timetable early on in the rooming process and it's available to the first round of rooming in May, it is very unlikely that you would not get the same room consistently across the piece, and you'll probably find that in where your class has not been given a consistent room, it's been one that has remained in our unsolvable bucket. So normally when we release the timetable, we then work quite closely with the school teams during the month of June, and in that time we work quite hard to find a space on the timetable, and that usually does involve a bit of movement of the teaching pattern. But where we can't do that, we continue to review it, and using the 80% utilisation and the changes that we see in size, we continue to review that, and we do tend to get most teaching into a consistent pattern. So it's a very small amount who don't get a consistent room, or it is ones who come onto the timetable very late and we don't actually see them with enough time to resolve it. Hopefully this year, by catching this information earlier on, we should reduce that in the session ahead. I think that's them all, Gary, on that screen. Is there anything else? Oh, Seamus training. I'll do the Seamus training. Seamus training invites will be issued middle of next week for the central timetabling team. They will be issued to everyone with a Seamus licence, whether they're on the edit and prep team or they're a wider school timetabler or somebody who for whatever reason has access to Seamus. If you are a user and you've not been online for a long time, please come along to the training and we'll pick up and we'll revisit training. If you're a new user and recently had training but want a bit more advice, again, please come along. All of the invites will be issued with a support guide and a single FAQ page to support what we'll be covering in the session. And if you need anything else, just come back to the team and we'll support either with a material guide or somebody in the team will come back.
Perfect. No, thank you, Andrina. And then just the last one on there in terms of how we are managing growth in the session. So that's really through the weekly sessions that we're going to have with the nominated contacts in terms of looking at if you are expecting growth in particular areas, can we work together to just work out what the impact of that would be on the timetable in terms of if you are looking for rooms of larger size or if you're looking to split an event into two, for example. So managing how do we plan to manage the group as growth is probably the same way that we're planning to manage all the change that we're encountering on the timetable, which is through those weekly sessions, and then obviously once we get closer to the time, if those numbers do change to the 80% rule that Andrina was saying, we hope that we've given ourselves enough flex to be able to then accommodate things and shuffle things about later in the cycle if it's needed. Okay, so that was some of the I think there's one more slide actually, some common questions. Okay, so again, what sort of common questions from the road shows. So the top left one, we will have some large cohorts that we will have to accommodate. Does this still come under consult or inform? So I think this question was asked because on the premise that we need to find a way to accommodate these large cohorts for whatever reason. But it would still be a consult, because unless we get to a scenario where we literally cannot find a solution, there is just no solution to the problem that we're looking at, we're not using the consult as a way of, giving the green light to actually accommodate the change. We're more wanting to consult to work out how we could accommodate that change, or how we accommodate such a large cohort. So we would still want to talk it through, just to make sure that we were making sure that the data that we were putting into CMIS gives us the best possible chance of accommodating it on the timetable. It's not necessarily that we're looking to consult just to sort of give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down in terms of accommodating that change. We are trying to be flexible and accommodate as much as we can. I appreciate there might be some things that just need to happen, but we still need to work together to work out actually how we make that happen in terms of what time those cohorts should be in, etc. Andrina, what is the biggest group site for session 24-25? You're on mute.
I jumped off and then jumped back on. We're waiting on the final confirmation from the Learning and Teaching group to confirm the principles for session 24-25. We do not see any change, and we're going to carry on. The biggest teaching group that we'll expect to see on the timetable will be 300, unless you've been part of the early adopters group or have already worked with our team to make sure that that's going to be supported somewhere else. So it's not a change for last year. We would say for anybody who's got a bigger group than 300 and knows there's going to be a problem, can you raise that really early in your kind of consult piece, because we're going to have to work to find a way to get that teaching onto the campus. And at above 300, it's really difficult because we just don't have spaces for the classes of that size. So definitely 300 stays in place again for this year.
Okay, and then just the last two, as we gather data, which I'm assuming is the requirements for the teaching requirements for 24-25, when making changes, should we log locally and then report under the banner of Inform Consult? Yes. So what we're expecting most places to do is, yes, locally manage that, and then every week through the context for the one that you need to consult it with, just come and have that conversation around about is there any concerns. There might be changes that are in that consult column that we're not concerned about at all. So it might well be that you expect to see a significant increase in size and you're looking for a larger room, but it's a time when we've got plenty larger rooms on campus. Therefore, it'll be a very quick answer of yes, just go ahead and update CMIS because we're comfortable with that. So yes, that's exactly what we're looking to do. And then the last one is around this clip view app that I mentioned for showing potential clashes by looking at 23-24's timetable. So we will look to roll that out initially to the nominated contacts as a smaller group. It's the first time we've ever used this tool. So we want to roll it out to a smaller group to see how it lands. It's got a lot of information on there. Timetable is quite complex. So we probably will use it for quite a simple function to start with, and then as we get more confident with it, we can think about its longer term use. So we will look to roll it out. It will be through the nominated contacts to start with, and the project team, and then we'll see how we go with that. But as I say, hopefully it helps. But again, first time we've used it, so bear with us on it a little bit. Okay, Juana. Were there any questions that come up on Menti that we've not covered?
Yes, we did have quite a few questions. Some of them did refer to things that were already covered. So I'll try to cover the ones that that are new or ask for a clarification to things we've already discussed. Okay, so I'll just go to the Menti now. The first one, and I think this is for Andrina, can we submit non-teaching events for our teaching rooms from mid-February to April?
And local space, I'm assuming that question relates to?
It does not specify, so I
You
only
can't
know they're
submit
asking.
so you cannot
Yeah, so
submit non-teaching events for central space. We will open in our usual kind of process for the non-teaching and central space in August. However, that does not include orientation week. Orientation week should be added now in the edit and prep period, as we room that as early as possible in the timetabling cycle. Some of those events will be tagged as non-teaching, but we'll work with the teams because there's additional tagging. And I'm just going to add to a comment to local space. If you have local space that you use for teaching and non-teaching, I would suggest that you should be trying to support your teaching before taking non-teaching events in these spaces. So good practice would say teaching comes first in teaching spaces.
Okay, thank you. The next question I think is more related to these states, but I haven't heard this one before, so it might be relevant to more than one person. Do we have rooms that allow students to join remotely? So with camera and microphone for the students to join remotely? No,
it's not.
I hadn't
It's
heard
not
of
yet
that.
standard across. So it's almost the kind of hybrid, high flex teaching. It's not something that's been supported as standard yet across the institution. So it's not something that's supplied. Definitely not in central teaching space. There may be some pockets in newer space and in local space, but nothing that's centrally supported.
Okay, thank you. A question that's more detailed about sizing. So I will ask it because it might resonate with others. On one course, we don't know the exact student numbers until close to when the teaching starts. So the numbers could range from anything like 12 to 18. So that changes the room size that we would ask for. So what should we request for a room size in that case?
So this is something that we are trying to help with longer term, because at the minute your actuals from last year will roll over. Now in the future we might be able to help a little bit in that, in terms of providing a little bit more of a scientific forecast, etc. But at the minute you would have last year's on there. I think based on put the number that you think at the minute, based on maybe previous year's experience, etc. And then, as I said, that's one of the reasons why we apply the 80% rule, is so that we've got that little bit of flex. And I don't know if you can think of anything else. We appreciate it.
I think you would be using the information that you've got for last year, which will be in the timetable when it opens. You should be kind of working locally with your local teams and your recruitment units to understand what they're predicting for the student enrolment. And then there is that piece, as Gary says, just about local knowledge. If you cross a room band, so you go for 12 to 18, that will be a consult on the discussion point with your edit and prep team. Anybody who sees themselves kind of crossing from one room band into another, even at quite small numbers, will probably or should definitely prepare to have some form of consultation on that if it looks like it's going to impact the room in your course.
And just when we're talking about bandings there, so the heat map for the estate that's got all the different room categories in terms of room sizes, so whether it's a room size 150 to 250, made up that room size, but it's a banding effectively. So it's really important that you link in with your nominated contacts. They'll have a heat map and they'll be able to tell you whether it's an increase that you're putting through that actually needs consultation or not. We're only really concerned about increases which mean that you are moving between the categories, i.e. you need a significantly larger room or you need a significantly smaller room, because that's therefore a change that maybe has a bigger impact on the rooms that you need.
Okay, thank you. Another question about sizing. What happens if timetabling is planned around 23, 24 numbers, but the core increase in August, September, there's an increase of say 10, and the course rooms, the room allocated is no longer appropriate?
So we've allocated a room, and then in this scenario, it's no longer appropriate. So it's so I'm assuming what you're saying is that the number of colleagues, the number of
enrollment
students
number
the
increased.
actual enrollment numbers is increased. Oh, well, we would then look to do that as a change request after rooming. So we would that's one of the reasons why we've got the flex. Once we get through June, we'll open up for change requests. And during that period, you would let us know that you need a different room because of a change in size, and we would look to try and accommodate that change for you. Again, if there's a room available at the original time, great. If we then need to work with you to move time and dates, then we'll do that. But there's an opportunity after rooming to raise changes. It's not that you're stuck on where you are if the number changes.
Okay, thanks. The next one, I have some very big lecture groups and had to split into 2-3 smaller groups. This meant I had to teach the same content 2 or 3 times. There aren't enough big lecture halls. What advice do you have?
I probably I would love to be able to build build some more. We've got the estate that we've got at the minute. We don't. We're not going to have any more large lecture rooms for 24-25. We do appreciate it's frustrating when that happens, but we're trying our best to accommodate as much of the learning and teaching as possible. But that's probably more a estate's question, one of in terms of sizes of rooms, etc. We've got available on campus rather than one that I can answer for from a timetabling process perspective. Yes,
thank you. And another one, also concerned with less standard teaching. What if I need to request 3 hours blocks of teaching? Is it possible to book such blocks?
One that we would just need to consider on a case-by-case basis. So if you're even considering doing that, I think it needs a really early conversation with one of your nominated contacts, and then we would need to work that through. It would take a fair bit of consultation, but so if you're thinking about doing it and it's something that you want to do, raise it early, and then we can have that conversation with you. So that would be my point. Raise it early.
Okay. Another one. Sometimes I see rooms that are booked but empty. Can you do anything about that?
Say that
Do you want me to
again?
take it?
Yeah.
So currently, rooms are booked on the timetable and people are not using them. We are working quite closely with the estates and the space planning team and a wider set of people on tools that will help us actually monitor if somebody's in the room. But right now, if you book a room and you don't use it, the room sits empty. So the responsibility in turn is falling back onto the teaching staff and the school teams that are supporting. If teaching is cancelled, you need to inform the centre it's cancelled to free up that room for another group to use that room, or for a student to book that room for student study. So currently, it's not something we can monitor anyway in the spaces, short of putting our head in every door on the hour. But we would ask that schools and colleges cancel sessions they're not using to free up space.
Okay. There's a few new questions, but I haven't been able to go through all of them. So some are quite quite detailed, I think. So I'm just trying to see if there's anything.
One thing I would say, if these people got questions about their specific area program, for example, I would link in directly with the nominated contacts from your area, and then we can have a weekly discussion with them on the specifics. You can just appreciate with the number of people on the call, we don't want to get down to route of talking about a specific course event, for example. We will be publishing the answer to all these questions on our FAQs. And just because I am conscious of time, and I know people will have teaching, etc., coming up at 4 o'clock. Meg, if you flip down to the next slide, we do have a microsite, a website that the FAQs live on. We'll put the link to this call on there as well. so that people can replay this and get more information. But if you've got a specific question about your particular area that you want to ask the project that you maybe don't want to ask in front of over 200 people, there is the Timetabling project mailbox there. So timetabling@glasgow.ac.uk. By all means, email it in. We will work our way through them. Also, it's a busy period as we get ready for CMUS opening on the 19th, but we will try and come back to you as quick as we can. I would say if it's more detailed, specific questions you've got at the minute, just so that people don't hang on and have to listen about something that doesn't relate to them, I would probably just encourage that everybody else contacts the mailbox, if that's okay.
Okay, there are a few more that are quite general, so
okay.
I'll cover maybe one or two more if we have time. So one that just came in is, when will you tell us the room size banding so we know when we cross from one up to the next?
So the heat map that's got the room band sizes on them will be shared with those nominated contacts next week, and then they're available for distribution. It's actually a point, if we can make it available on the microsite, we will do. But certainly they'll all be out next week to your nominated contacts if you want to take a look at those sizes, the bandings.
Mm-hmm. And another one, which we might just be able to give general advice at the moment. If there's a large increase, and I know that's the case for PGT, when they have a large increase of students, should they plan for the maximum increase, since they cannot give an exact estimate? And this may be on a case by case, but looking for any thoughts.
It's the same as the last question. You should be using what rolled over. You should be working with your recruitment team, and you should be using that sort of local insight, and perhaps on their levels as well, conversations with deans and wider teams. If everybody goes to the max on everything, we will not fit onto the campus at all. So there is, and they should all come through the consult piece and the edit and prep period if they're seeing growth like that. So we should be having a conversation about them.
You've got to use the contacts you've got with locally to try and come up with what you think a sensible number is, rather than pitching it at the maximum. We know that as you move up through the room sizes, the availability becomes lower and lower because we've got less room sizes. So like Andrina says, everybody goes to the max. It's going to end up with a whole load of unroomed eventually when it comes to post-June. So work as best as you can locally to come up with the best number that you can as of end of April, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, and final questions. I'm quite at the end of the list. Concerns online classes. Due to immigration compliance, international students are not permitted to take online classes. Could they be added to the consult list?
Yes. As the answer, they have to be for that compliance, and the students are going to have to be in this country, then they shouldn't be, they can't be taught online, and we need to work out how we're going to add those onto the timetable. So they're consult on the list.
Okay, thank you very much. I've gone through all of them, but I will add more to the FAQs, which will be published because some were more detailed.
Okay, Juana, thank you, because I appreciate it's difficult to scroll through multiple, especially if some of the questions are longer and and ask them on the call at the same time. As I say, we will publish them in the FAQs, as Juana says, and there is the project mailbox there if you've got a specific question for the mailbox. When it comes to edit and prep, as I said, probably the most important part of what we're going to do for 24-25, work as close as you can with your professional service colleagues and those nominated edit and prep contacts to try and make it as successful as we can, because we are trying to move away from minimal change but work together to try and make it a successful timetable. Right, thank you very much for your time, and have a good rest of your day.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.